We are live, all good in the hood. Yes, I know it's not Friday, but this couldn't wait, okay? And we've got another really important live stream to come tomorrow. You don't want to miss that one. It's all about council tax. But tonight, it's all about 15-minute cities and response times with the emergency services. And there are big issues already. And this, as you know, they're just rolling out the trial schemes, okay? A lot of this started back in 2020 and it was supposed to be temporary, but it looks like it's still in place in lots of the cities all the way around the UK. Now, the big issue, big shock, should I say, was a few days ago, I paid a day trip visit to a place called Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury, depending on how posh you are. But I was absolutely shocked. It was heavily pedestrianised. I believe it's just for a Saturday between 10 and 4. And all the car parks there are ANPR and they want you to download apps and all that scary, horrible stuff. So it made me think, what if an ambulance had to get through, or a firefighter, or some, or police even, and all of these barriers are up all over the place. So yes, the poll, I commenced the poll earlier today, and I just had a little look before we come online, and 88% of all of you who voted in that poll said yes, they do believe that these barriers will affect response times to the emergency services here in the UK. So it's an overwhelming majority, as you can appreciate. We've got someone who's got a lot of experience in the field with ambulances, etc. And I'm going to be bringing him into the chat very, very shortly. But for now, we just want to make sure everything is okay and we're all good in the hood. So yeah, if you can please take part in that poll, the more people we can get to vote in that poll, the better. So you probably won't be able to do it if you're watching on the replay, but this is just live. And already we got nearly 300 people here. Not bad in 2 minutes for a weekday. So I appreciate all of you being here. So we are going to have a quick look at the comments. And yes, we got a few people from all over the place. Andrew Christopher, there you go, sir. You get a special mention. He always says hi. Right. So what should we do? Well, I'll tell you one thing. This is only going to get worse unless something is done about it. Okay. So if any of you guys have had any issues with anyone that you know who has been probably affected with these barriers and, the emergency services arriving later than they could have, and it's had a diverse effect on the situation, please send me an email. The email address is below this video. Okay. So we're just warming up now. We got nearly 500 already. Absolutely awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our guest and we're going to get someone who has some real life experience in the ambulance service. So without further ado, we're going to bring the guy in right now, and please say a nice warm welcome to Mike. I'm a cockroach, as you know. How you doing, buddy?
I'm all right, Funky. Yourself?
Yeah, winning at life, mate. We're just hanging in there and pushing forward like we should do. So
all good, nothing bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely spot on the money. So yeah, just quickly, guys, before we come in there, we were just having a real brief chat, and it was a brief chat. And Mike brought up something very interesting, which we're going to have a quick look at as we go through tonight's show. So yeah, Mike, can you tell the viewers your experience within the ambulance service?
So I spent 20 years as a frontline paramedic. I ran the first paramedic response units on the streets of London in a trial, and I ended up working on the rescue helicopter in London. So 20 years, pre-hospital care. In London, there have always been barriers. So there's been barriers to housing estates. There's been controlled access. There were lots of roads in the city of London. I ran the only ambulance station in the city of London for 7 years, and lots of streets in the city of London have barriers. But the ambulances always had what was called a set of fire keys. So they would have keys to the barriers, and if you know where you're going, it can save an awful lot of time. Even though. So the driver drives up to the barrier, the attendant jumps out, they open the barrier, the ambulance drives through, they close the barrier, get in the truck, and boom. But there's so many one-way systems and all the rest of it in central London that those little rat runs can save you. Well, they can be the difference between life and death. I mean, it's that simple. Response times for ambulances when I worked on the front line were you had to get to something like 90% of the calls within 8 minutes, and 100% of the calls within 14. And if you didn't achieve that 14-minute response time, then there was an inquiry. Someone would ask why, and there's all sorts of reasons, heavy traffic, bad weather, ambulances break down just like other vehicles do. But whatever the reason was, you are accountable and you have to explain it. So the kind of 15-minute cities, instantaneously, the emergency services will be given an exemption. They always are, and they are because you can't run a city without them, and that's just the long and short of it, But the other thing that springs to mind is, so I think the London Ambulance Service have got 2,000 frontline staff on duty at any one time. They've got between 650 and 1,000 trucks on the road 24 hours a day. And very few of the people that work for the London Ambulance Service live in central London because they can't afford it. That's the long and the short of it. And that's true for the majority of the emergency services. It would be unusual for someone to be able to afford to live in, the City of London is probably one of the most expensive real estates in the world. So a frontline firefighter or a paramedic or a police officer highly unlikely to be able to afford to live anywhere in or near the City of London. So everyone's coming in. And the other thing is these people predominantly work shift work, so there'd be 12-hour days and 12-hour nights. I had shifts that started at 6 in the morning. I had shifts that finished at 2:30. So the idea that everyone can use public transport is delusional. If you're doing a 2-hour day if you're doing a 12-hour day with 2 or 3 hours traveling, that's a 15-hour day. By the time you get home, you're literally having some food, having a wash, going to bed, getting up, going back to work. And that's how you live.
Yeah. I'm just going to quickly show this on the screen here, guys, just to give you a visual about some of the things which has been going on. So I want you to have a look at this image here. Okay. Now, the paramedics had to wait up to 20 minutes to get to a patient who had collapsed in an alleyway because their ambulance was blocked by these new bollards installed as part of the council traffic scheme in Ealing over there in West London. Okay. And also, it just goes on. The London Ambulance Service had not been given keys to the new barriers when they were called to an incident on Saturday afternoon, 3 days after the new bollards and flower beds were put up by Ealing Council. Okay, and that is just one council in one of the many boroughs of London. So just like Mike was saying there was issued keys back in the day to get through certain barriers or defences to get to where they needed to get to. And like we just saw there, Mike, that's probably not a one-off incident. I mean, I can envisage this happening all over, not just London, but the UK too.
I mean, you really are talking. You really are talking about a loss of life. If your response time is delayed, you see, what I'm thinking is that ambulance. If I'd arrived at that obstacle, so I park the ambulance, I get the trolley bed out, I put all my equipment on the trolley bed, and I wheel it to wherever it is. But if it's at the other end of that street, so let's say you've got a resus. Let's say someone's had a heart attack, and you've got a resus in progress. I mean, that really is the difference between life and death. If you can park your truck, like I've driven ambulances onto the platform at Liverpool Street Station. Yeah, if you know where you're going. Yeah, with local knowledge, if you know where you're going. So I would sort of go to a place called Primrose Street, which there was a taxi rank there that led into the station, but you could actually drive onto the platform, boom. And I'd take the truck as close to the incident as I could, because that's my ultimate working environment. What I want to do is I want to scoop the patient up, worst possible scenario, get them on the truck. As soon as I've got them on the truck, it's clean, it's dry, it's warm. I've got all my equipment to hand. Suddenly, that person's life expectancy is doubled, tripled. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. Like we just saw there, were those barriers there? You know, if they couldn't progress any further, it just said he had another 40 yards to go, and he had to get the trolley off of the wagon to the patient. It's always going to be hacking wind and rain, isn't it? Which is not the
yeah,
best if they've got open injuries, etc.
yeah. It's always 2 o'clock in the morning in the pouring rain. You know, I remember going into so paramedics have to go back into hospital to recertify every 2 or 3 years, and you work for a consultant anaesthetist, and they sign you off on certain skills. But an anaesthetist said to me, you know, what's the most important thing about intubating a patient? So intubation is where you are going to ventilate someone artificially, you know, because they can't breathe for themselves, for example. And you know, the consultant said to me, the most important thing is that you position the pillow correctly. Well, the last time I intubated a patient before that, it was a guy was in a taxi, and the taxi was under the trailer of an articulated lorry. It was in the middle of the night. It was pouring rain. There was just enough room for me to crawl in, and that's where I intubated him, and I didn't have a pillow. You know, so sometimes, you know, sometimes you're going to need to make it up as you go along. You live on your wits.
Yeah.
And like I say, you know, with experience, that's the difference between life and death for people.
Yeah, a lot of it is improvising and working on the fly, isn't it? Because it's not all textbook, as you know.
Yeah, like the military, you know, pre-hospital care as emergency action drills. If you don't know what to do, do this. Yeah. So, but over time, you will gather your own experience and expertise. You know, I used to do something crazy. When I got to the scene of an accident, I'd do what's called a primary and secondary survey. So primary survey is your ABC: airway, breathing, circulation, arrest major hemorrhage. Secondary survey is a head to toe survey of the patient looking for secondary injuries. Yeah. But I used to put a rubber glove around the ankle of a patient. Probably when I first arrived. So I do my primary survey I check their patent airway, see spine, and then I'd put this rubber glove around an ankle and I forget about it. Yeah. But when I got them on the ambulance, if I couldn't get any IV access anywhere, there's a vein that runs down the inside over your ankle bone called the medial malleolus. Well, most people have got shoes and socks on. Most people's feet are warm. And so that particular vein is dilated. So if I couldn't get any access anywhere else, I'd always get access in that vein. It's quite unusual. If I did get access, I'd just take the glove off. But it's a sort of temporary tourniquet, you know. But it's also a drug route, you know. So something as simple as epilepsy. You know, if you're going to administer diazomols, diazepam, stuff like that, to assist to stop people fitting. You know, you just need IV access is the ultimate. But the the access is kind of everything. Now that post will, you know, I'll tell everybody, but that post will have it should have a yellow padlock on it. It should have a yellow padlock, and yellow padlocks are for the fire keys, for fire service access. So every emergency vehicle should have a set of fire keys on it, and that will give you keys to the run-of-the-mill barriers, padlocks, anything yellow. They're all the same. Well, I'll tell you the truth. You know, keys on trucks used to get lost and mislaid, and you could pick up a shift and have a truck, and you wouldn't have a set of fire keys on it. So people used to acquire their own. I have my own set of fire keys. I have a set of fire keys with an oxygen key clipped on my crash bag, because they were just the things that went missing, you know. But you could buy a set of fire keys on eBay.
Yeah, I know. I remember checking before. And before we crack on, I'm just going to show a little bit of video of what is actually happening out there. Okay. Now, this guy obviously needs to get to the scene ASAP, and you can just tell by the stupidity of it all. I mean, these things, the weird thing is these planters have wheels on and you can just move them around and stuff. But to be honest, they shouldn't really be there in the first place. that's my own personal opinion on this, because it's just making it harder for people to do their jobs efficiently. Okay, and it's always going to be an emergency, and it's not just the ambulance service. I mean, firefighters, they really need to get to someone ASAP to get that fire under control before it spreads and causes serious damage. Not only that, the police as well. The police need to get somewhere in a serious emergency, and all these barriers are just making it more ridiculous. I mean, if you took a look at this, this is insane when you look at this.
This, with all these zones in Oxford, that coach has just hit another coach because it can't get round the freaking corner. There's all these zones that nobody can get down because all this clean air bullshit. And he's just hit him because nobody can get past each other. You get down a road and then you... There we go, disconnecting again. This is Oxford Council. What date is it, guys? Is it the 19th of February? This is after they've shortly put all these...
So yeah, we could just play that forever and ever and ever, but it just gives you guys an idea. And the fact of the matter is that it's causing so much divide within communities. You do start to see people literally taking the law into their own hands, maybe probably for their own situations and circumstances, but a lot of them realize that, yeah, do you know what, the ambulance does need to get down this road, and if it has to reverse or whatever else, or there's heavy traffic because of this, you do see this sort of stuff going on too. It's just insane. What you can see here is a guy, obviously in the dead of night, identity concealed, is removed the barrier, and he's actually put in fast set cement in there. So it's literally, people have just had enough and they're doing this. Okay, now you're also seeing this sort of thing in broad daylight. That's how crazy it's got now. So first thing in the morning, that's all going to be set. You're getting these bollards here. Obviously, I mean, if you look at that, and an ambulance was in an emergency, they got diverted because of traffic, they went down one of these roads, they're going to have to stop and do something. I mean, you can, I know it's comical, but it's literally is, the people have had enough. And that's a road that's always been used. They put these little bollards there now. And now I think the council, they've seen what's going on, and they're spending a lot more money making these proper heavy duty still almost permanent now. Okay, so it's a knock-on effect. I mean, where do you draw the line? But like I said, this is obviously going to impact emergency services. And like Mike was saying, you know, it could be the difference between life and death. I mean, when's it going to end, Mike? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I remember instances where I used a truck and physically push a planter like that out the way. I mean, 100%. You know, I remember going onto a housing estate just off of Old Street, sort of City Road, and there were planters to stop people driving in, you know, to the estate. And I remember just pushing them out of the way with the truck, you know. But you know, because like you say, you know, the alternative, someone dies, and that's the long and short of it. You know, the other thing is, I mean, I think what we're up against, and there's been a sort of tide change over the last few years, where I remember when I worked on the front line, if I was in a queue of traffic, and let's say there were 10 cars in front of me at a red traffic light, people would push through the red traffic light and let you through. Yeah, but now, I mean, I recently recalled a story where a guy moved through, there was no oncoming traffic, it was safe to do so. The guy drove through a red traffic light to move out the way for an ambulance, got £100 ticket.
Whoa.
And when he went to court, the court upheld the ticket. You know, and so now I think the driving guidance for kind of frontline emergency workers is that you leave the blue lights on, but you turn the sirens off and you just wait. You just wait in traffic with everyone else, you know.
Bloody hell.
And that's, so we're back in this acceptable revenue creation, you know. It's not road safety. I've never really looked upon speed cameras as road safety. I've always looked upon them as revenue creation.
Yeah, you know, 100%.
It's tax, and that's the long and the short of it. The idea, I mean, I remember listening to Ken Livingstone talk, and he said, you know, there isn't a situation where a speed camera is put up just to raise money. You know, he said it's normally a black spot. Something's happened at that location. There's been an accident. There's been someone seriously injured, and that's why the camera's there. And that's right. But again, you know, I can remember a call that I went to on the commercial road. So the commercial road is one of the major arteries into the city of London. It's 4 lanes wide. Yeah? A 72-year-old man who was an incredible guy, but was a big old docker, and he'd gone out and he'd had 20 pints of lager.
Cool.
And then he decided to cross the commercial road. Well, the surprise would have been if he'd have made it. You know,
Wow.
and anyway, subsequently he got hit by a car. He was quite seriously injured, but the car, you know, he stepped out between 2 parked vehicles. The car was doing 30 miles an hour in a built-up urban area, and he got hit. You know, so that particular accident wasn't anything to do with the motorist. You know,
what you saying about like just then when you said like you got a fine for doing the right thing, it just reminded me. I remember seeing pictures. In fact, while she was talking, I just found it. So have a look at this. Ambulances being wheel clamped. Okay, it is just. I mean, who? Why? It's just. It absolutely beggars belief, mate. It seriously doesn't.
I remember pulling over to take a call on the Holloway Road, sort of going out of London. So this is sort of Upper Street, Canonbury, heading north out of London. And it's a red route, no stopping, no parking. And I remember they were trying to allocate us a call. It was very difficult in those days, it was difficult to write a call down when you're bumping down the road, you know. So I said to my driver, pull over, just want to take these details down. Eddie kind of pulled over, parked on the left, and a traffic warden come up and said, you know, you can't stop here, blah, 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 you know. And I sort of said, look, you know, we're just taking an emergency call down, we're only going to be a moment. And he said, you know, I'm going to write you a ticket. And my response was, mate, if you want to write a ticket, go ahead, write all the tickets you want, you know.
Yeah, because you've got to do what you've got to do and you've got to crack on, deal with it later.
In those days, we used to have to write the call down, and then you might have to look it up in a map book, or you might have to find where you're going. You know, the local knowledge over years is brilliant. You know, I used to say to people, you could be the greatest paramedic in the world, but if you don't know where you're going, you're not a lot of good to anyone. So
it's like taxi drivers, isn't it? Without that knowledge, they're pretty much useless.
Back then, you spent 50% of your time learning your craft, which was to cheat death. And you spent 50% of your time learning every rat run and every shortcut there was in your territory. You know,
just to give you the best advantage you can possibly get.
You need to be able to get places, and like I say, you know, for the emergency services, on occasion, the alternative is death. You know, and that's it. You know, so that's how serious it is. But it's the local authorities. You see, I think the worst thing about this situation is you don't know who to hold accountable for bad laws. Right? So the local authority will turn around and say, no, it's not us. It's Sadiq Khan. It's TfL. And Sadiq will turn around and say, no, it's not me. It's central government. The central government will say, no, we're not in charge of that. A local authority.
Transport for London, and it bounces around, doesn't it?
And so you don't know who to hold accountable. It would be a lovely idea, you know, if Sadiq Khan, Transport for London, passed, you know, laws or legislation that you didn't agree with. Well, in 3 years' time, you don't vote for him. You know.
Yeah. I mean, he gets every 4 years in terms of.
That's what I mean. So, but during the pandemic, there wasn't an election. It got cancelled, and Sadiq Khan got another term.
I know, criminal, mate. To be honest.
So I would love an opportunity to really hold our local central government officials, you know, to account. But, you know, we don't. People constantly talk to me and say, "Oh, but you know, we live in a democracy," but we don't. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a parliamentary democracy, which means every 4 years, for 4 days, you get to elect whoever you want.
Yeah.
Thereafter, they decide what's good for you. They decide what laws are going to be passed. They decide what restrictions, what methods of taxation are going to be used, and you are completely powerless and you're compliant. So we don't truly live in a democracy.
No,
you need to
it's
take
pretty
it on,
much Napoleonic law. What it is now,
you need
which
to
is
take
the
it on the
opposite.
chin. If this is our little system and it's the best we've come up with,
Yeah,
but know what you got.
That's what I showed earlier with the guy and the other people just had enough and doing what they feel is necessary.
Direct action. Yeah, I mean there are there are people that get to the end of their tether and take direct action, but in truth, direct action has changed. I guess the best example would be the Poltac riots. So there were this was how we were going to taxation locally for local government, and the people sort of rose up and fought back against it, and it didn't happen. So
exactly, we need more of that, I think, because it's all well and good going on these protests and taking selfies and stuff and all going home afterwards on a nice sunny day, but what is it actually achieved? But going back to what we saw about response times, I want you and the guys to have a look at this, which I dug up earlier. Now, this is from the Mail Online a while back. Now, we can see it black and white, clear as crystal. Low traffic neighborhoods, which is what the LTN actually stands for, if you didn't already know, do delay ambulances on 999 calls because paramedics are unaware of road changes that were brought in very quickly in lockdown. And it just goes on to say more than 100 incidences have been blocking ambulances. And this was back in the day. I mean, you could look at the date here. It's September 2021. But lots of these places are still operational in towns and cities all over the UK. So it wasn't just a trial because of the issue back in 2020. And lots of it really has... hold on a sec. You all good there? I just heard some weird noises.
My beautiful daughter just started her trumpet lesson.
You got fanfare, dude. You always want one of those, didn't you? Oh, spot on. But yeah, it was just another example of all of this stuff which is going on, and this is quite interesting. You touched on briefly about response times.
Yep.
Now, if I can pull it up on the screen, let me just try and find the logo. There it is. Now, this is current. Okay, we pulled it off the website earlier. Now, London Ambulance Service, NHS Trust, all official and above board, meeting our targets. Now, I don't know if this was what you had back in the day when you was in, but you've got categories 1 to 4 here. Okay, so you're looking at the top one, obviously a cardiac event, that's always going to be right up there. I would presume stroke would be up there too, but they put that in Cat 2, and it just goes down through the list. Now, this was back in 2017. And look at this. For a Cat 1 incident, you're looking at 7 minutes response times. Okay. Cat 2 goes on to 18, and so it progresses. Now, we can obviously agree that the times in real times are way different than what you see there. And I do think that's mainly not obviously just down to these little bollards people putting everywhere, but in just life and traffic in general. And the consensus is from lots of people who've taken part in polls and votes about all of this LTN stuff all over the UK is it just clogs up traffic like even worse than what it already was before. So obviously it's going to impact anything that the ambulance services do, for starters, right?
Yeah, traffic calming measures, so good old-fashioned speed bumps, but if you've got someone on a truck who is dead or dying, or maybe they've got a long bone fracture, you do your best to sort of slow down over those things.
Yeah, or a knuckle spine injury on speed bumps.
Yeah, exactly. But my point is that it's all kind of valuable time. The only place for a seriously injured patient is in a well-equipped casualty unit, not in the back of an ambulance.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
But traffic calming. I remember a call. I was running out of Hackney Ambulance Station in East London, and we got a call to the Bank Underground. Right now it's probably only let's say it's 5 miles. It's not it's not an amazing distance anyway. But I got the call at 1700, so 5 in the evening. It was a winter. It was raining heavily, and we were the nearest ambulance. And even back then, I remember an arrival time of over 25 minutes. The Bank Underground is the deepest one on the network, So when you get there, there's a one-way system in play during the rush hour. Yeah, so from where we arrived on the surface to the platform that we needed to go to was quite a short distance, but we couldn't walk against the flow of the traffic, of the people using the network. Yeah, so we had to go around this one-way system over 25 minutes until we arrived on scene, and subsequently the guy died. It was a cardiac episode, and it turned out to be fatal. Now, I felt quite bad about that, but it really wasn't anything to do with me. I moved heaven and earth, and I did everything I could to make a difference. But the system failed him. How on earth could we have been the nearest available ambulance in Hackney? There are half a dozen ambulance stations closer, as you go into the City of London. So traffic and being able to get about. I mean, I'm sure, the mayor will turn around and say, well, traffic calming measures and congestion charging are A, cutting the traffic down, and B, reducing its speed. Therefore, the emergency services can get about. But mate, if anyone that's ever driven in London over the last kind of 5 years, Sergeant Fruitcake came over to London, and we met up, and traffic bumper to bumper every single day. It wouldn't enter my head to go into central London unless I was going on my motorcycle.
Good choice of transport, by the way.
Yeah, because the congestion, you got to pay the congestion charge, and then I'd have to pay the ULEZ charge. I mean, straight away that's 25 quid
before you do anything else.
Parking is just ridiculous. If I said parking was £1 a minute, I wouldn't be very far off the money. I mean,
you know what, mate? I went to that Shrewsbury, right, and I couldn't believe it. For 3 hours, it was like nearly 9 quid.
Yeah, I mean,
that shocked me.
You don't want to, I want to rent this space to park my car. I don't want to buy it.
It's not prime real estate, is it?
But the motorist is the cash cow. We do pay, the highest duty on fuel in Europe. We've got, you see, these little 15-minute villages and cities that you're talking about, Funky.
Yeah.
I think how they're going to pan out is there will be a zone from where you live. So let's say the zone is, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles wide or 5 miles wide or whatever it is. You'll be fine provided you live and work and operate within it. But as soon as you step out of it, you'll be road charged. That I think is how it's going to be enforced. They're not going to sort of police anybody. You're not going to get arrested for going out of your zone. But as soon as you do, you will be paying through the nose, to the point where most regular working people won't be able to afford it.
Yeah. Do you know what I was looking earlier about the fines? I mean, if I found them, I found some comments that this guy's left on a few videos about it. Let me just show this one. Here we go. The Metropolitan Police, meanwhile, told Ealing that the LTN brought concerns about the impact of an officer response times for surrounding area. The police attended the LTN could also create a crime hotspot where criminals would use these types of closures to evade the police. Interesting. And the same guy goes on to comment here. Ealing saw London Ambulance Service manager asked the council to permanently remove these barriers after paramedics were delayed when attending a call out. They were unable to park nearby to an elderly patient's home. 95-year-old lady had transported some distance in the rain to the ambulance, which is pretty much what we said before. It's always going to be adverse weather when these situations occur. Appreciate the impression that the LAS, London Ambulance Service, has been fully consulted on LTN schemes ahead of the implementation, but sadly, I'm afraid that this was not the case from the London Ambulance Service. And it just goes on. Islington Council in London had to alter an LTN road by removing a bollard after feedback from emergency services. Wandsworth Council told us that 7 LTNs it reversed were cancelled partly due to concerns with emergency access. So you've got someone within the service there, and he's literally leaving comments on videos for these people who are definitely for these barriers everywhere. Mainly cyclists and environmentalists, but without getting too political, at the end of the day, the most important thing is the preservation of human life, regardless of all of this green agenda and all the rubbish that they're putting out there. And surely that has to be the primary focus. I mean, without an ambulance service, where would we be really?
I'd love to believe that was the case, Funky, but like I say, I've recently been travelling in and out of London for a few days, and I mean, revenue creation seems to be the motivation. Full stop. You know, so you've got no parking zones, you've got congestion charging, you've got the ultra low emission zone, you've got parking enforcement. I mean, the motorist is just a cash cow. That's the only way I can look at it. But the other thing that I think these controlled parking zones, these 15-minute villages, this controlled access is going to do, is it is a tax for tradespeople. So if you live in one of these places, how do you get services? So your washing machine breaks and you phone a guy up, and I think we're going to get to a situation where tradesmen turn around and say, I'm really sorry, I don't go there.
Yeah, I can't do zone 4 because it's off.
If it's a painter, a decorator, if it's a plumber, if it's a trade of any kind, gas engineer, either the guy's going to say, well, I mean, my son used to have an awning business. So my son was the brains and I was the money, and I was involved in it for a few years. But I remember if we got jobs in the city of London, I would put 100 quid on a quote straight away because I just knew that the van, we had 2 vans, and it's highly likely we're going to get a £75 parking ticket.
Yeah.
Boom. So straight away, the service was 100 quid dearer. And the local authority, I think that's all right. That's all right.
It's definitely a money-making scam, isn't it? When you look at it, I mean,
it filters down to the citizen, to the individual, to the customer, and you get to a stage where regular working people cannot afford that service.
Yeah,
you just can't afford that service. Simple. So that's where we are going. So I think this is, I understand environmental issues. I was born 1959. 1952 was the great smogs of London, where pea supers, where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So of course we live in a time where we have to do the best we can about pollution.
But with your young lungs, you are still here now.
I mean, it's
incredible.
But there comes a point where commerce is what pays for everything.
Yeah.
They were talking about banning articulated lorries in central London during the day. And then that's a great idea. That's a great idea, provided you're willing to see all your shops with no food in or no product.
Yeah.
Because
it drives it all, doesn't it? Literally.
It's got to be delivered somehow, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And
I know. It's weird because the future that they're trying to rush towards, it's going to take so much time to get there. I would say the word organically, but they've obviously got an agenda by 2030. All of these certain goals have to be achieved, and there's money bonuses for all those involved, and that's all they really care about, without the likes of you and I, obviously. And like you said, and I've seen this in the press, cash cows. The British motorist is an inflated cash cow, to be honest. I mean, we're getting taxed left, right, and Chelsea with all of it, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, look at the expansion of ULEZ with Mr. Khan and his merry men. I mean, people in London, how they haven't just rose up and literally just done something about it, I just do not know.
It's a multi-billion-pound project, but it goes hand in hand with the electrification of motor vehicles.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
I mean, if everybody went out tomorrow and bought an electric car, the national grid would crash.
It would instant. Yeah.
We don't have the infrastructure to produce the electricity that we needed. I remember um, Boris Johnson talking about how at the end of the Second World War there were 8 million people in London, and the population of London is heading that way now. And in the recent past, it has hit that sort of target. But my point is, today everyone's plugging in their iPhone, everyone's plugging in their laptop, everybody's, we are consuming power beyond the comprehension of people at 1945 at the end of the Second
Oh yeah,
World
yeah,
War.
yeah. 100%.
So the kind of the mega sewers and all the rest of it that they're recently building. I mean, the infrastructure of a mega city, we just haven't made the investment. You can, all you're doing with electric vehicles is turning around and saying that the wealthy and the rich can drive wherever they want, because it's beyond.
That's where it's going, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're a police officer, a firefighter, a nurse, a paramedic,
Yeah.
there is no way in the world you've got 40 or 50 grand to buy an electric car. No way in the world. It's beyond you, and that's the truth of it. And these are people that are not, I wouldn't say they were badly paid. I mean, I know of lots of occupations that don't earn anywhere near that sort of money, and they can't afford it. These are people in our society that can't afford it. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to pay the tax.
Yeah.
I
think how it's going within 2 years, if your net family income is going to be like sub 70k, you're going to seriously struggle. And all of these people, they're loaded, really, aren't they?
I was doing some TV the other day, and I was talking to Vanessa Phelps, and she sort of said, "Well, what does it cost to live in London?" And I said,
"She's great, isn't she?"
I said to Vanessa, I said, "You know what, Vanessa?
Piece of string.
you need to be taking home £500 a week
minimum,
to live in London. That'd be your bare minimum. Because I sort of said, if you live in London, your rent is 2.5 to 3 grand. Something like that. Be 1,800, 2 grand, 2.5 grand, something like that. You got to travel to and from work. That's £100 a week. You got to eat, and then you got all the utilities on top of that. So
prices, council tax, it's all crazy.
Yeah. But I sort of said to her, minimum you've got to be earning, just to be there, you've got to be earning £500 a week. But if you want to live in London comfortably, you've got to be on £1,000 a week. You've got to be earning £1,000 a week to be able to afford to live in London, because that puts you on 4 grand. But like I said, your rent's 2 grand.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back in time, say, I don't know, maybe the 80s, maybe the 90s, I'd say the 90s. So it would be probably feasible and normal to expect a bog standard average family in the UK to go abroad for a week a year, maybe have an half decent Christmas, and maybe go to a restaurant once a month or something. That wasn't too much to ask. You try and do that now with an average income, not a chance. You kiss goodbye to that holiday. The restaurant, I mean, well, the prices are ridiculous, the quality's poor, and it's just not like it used to be. And it's changing so rapidly that a lot of people are, I think, getting mental health problems because they just want it back to normal. And we all know, well, most of us do, that it ain't going to happen. So
Funky, every time we conclude something, so we had Brexit, we had the pandemic, but I kind of think that I find myself just waiting for the next thing. I don't find myself celebrating the end of whatever it was. Say, oh, thank God it's over and we can all get back to a normal life, because I think a normal life is gone. I'm not quite sure. Quite sure what a normal life is. Because we have still got COVID hanging over us. So there was a worry, wasn't there, that we got something coming down the tracks that's going to be a combination of the flu and COVID, and it's going to be the perfect storm. And it wipes out the NHS again, and it wipes out the food delivery system, and we all take a big step backwards, and we all start living this kind of contained life. which which I have a little bit of trouble about. I am so envious that you managed to get out and live where you do, and and I've been down there, and it's a kind of beautiful old place, But I constantly say to people, that's where I need to be, but it's where I need to be because I feel in my heart. You were talking about stress and health and well-being. I feel in my heart that living in an urban environment with the constant taxation and the constant compliance, that is something that is genuinely making me more and more and more anxious. And as I get older, that anxiety becomes more and more difficult to cope. Do
you know what? And it's absolutely true because like some of you guys know, born and bred in Portsmouth, lived there, and I've been living here for just over a year, right? So, city boy, used to situational awareness, always problems, always traffic, always noise. I mean, it's a 4.5 mile square island with between 250 and 270,000 people living in it. But let me tell you, that's densely populated, that's stress, that's chaos, and that was back then. But now I'm out here, it's a different world. Everyone talks to each other. The stress is well down. And let me tell you this, when I went to that Shrewsbury on Saturday, I think it was, with my son, it's like a 2-hour drive there, 2-hour drive back. We spent 3 hours there or just over. And I couldn't wait to get out. I'm serious, because I'm there with my son, just us two, and I'm fully aware that, bad things happen to good people, like you keep saying, and it's absolutely true. I mean, when you look around, the situational awareness in cities these days, with people just looking down on their phones, not looking where they're going, it's insane.
When I met up with Sergeant Fruitcake, who came to London,
I can imagine you two,
we went out and we went to a kind of a motorcycle destination location, and we had a good drink and a lovely time. We were sitting there and we were sort of trumping each other, and he was saying exactly that. So he lives in a rural location in Northern Ireland, and he was saying, Mick, I've never been so on edge as I am in London, to the point where he had a little kind of trauma pack, a little first aid kit in his bag that he had with him. And I said, I can do better than that. And I opened my pocket and I brought out my Israeli dressing, and I had a triangular bandage, and I had a bandana, and I had a tactical pen.
Uzi pen, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Right. So for me, my bandana is my tourniquet. So I tie it around the limb, I tie a knot in it, I put the tactical pen in it, I wind it up, that's my tourniquet. Then I've got my trauma dressing. Then I've got my triangular bandage. With triangular bandage, just a wound pad. Just an instant, take it out of your pocket, put it on, boom.
Jam it in there,
But we both had this. We live hundreds and hundreds of miles apart, but we both think the same. So you're mentioning situational awareness, and so about Cooper's Code, 4 colours. This is the easiest way to tell people that are watching about situational awareness. So Cooper's Code. So Cooper, during the end of the Second World War, he was a US Marine. Come round to Vietnam, he's a lieutenant colonel. Guys are getting killed on and off duty because they have no situational awareness. And he's trying to do something about that. He comes up with Cooper's Code. Cooper's Code is 4 colours. It's white, yellow, orange, and red. And you are always in one of those colours. So right now, me and you, we're in a controlled environment. People here have our friends and family. The doors are locked. We've got controlled access, and we're in white. And what the white zone is switched off. When you're in a safe environment with controlled access, you're switched off. If you leave this environment for any reason, you are in yellow, and yellow is alert and aware. So when you go to the shop, when you cross the road, when you do the school run, when you on your commute to work, whatever it is, you are in alert and aware of what's going on around you, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. People walking down the road with their mobile phone, no situational awareness. A cyclist, a motorcycle comes along, snatches a phone, £600 phone gone, because they had no situational awareness. So yellow is alert and aware, and that's what you should be every time you leave a safe environment. Then you go on to orange, and orange is a state of alarm. So a state of alarm is something's happening. There are people on the other side of the road and they're raising their voices and shouting at each other. There's a mob of maybe 6 guys coming towards you on the pavement. They look like they've had a bit of a drink. You know,
Yeah.
A moped drives on the pavement.
A raised alertness level, isn't there, instantly?
Any unusual activity should put you in a state of alarm, and that is orange. And the final state for situational awareness is the red zone. And the red zone is a necessity for action. It doesn't matter what you do, but you must do something.
Immediate action drills.
Run in a shop and hold the door shut. Run, fight, scream, whatever it is.
Do something, innit? Yeah.
If you do not do something, you will become a victim. You will become a casualty. Right? So white, yellow, orange, and red, Cooper's code, and that is situational awareness. You know, and I was talking to my 11-year-old today about it. I was talking to Gracie on the way home from school about situational awareness.
Now times change, huh?
Bum, bum, bum. You know, because it's the old. If you go looking for trouble, normally you find it.
Yeah.
You know, if you walk down that dark alleyway because it's a shortcut home, the risk of something happening is higher. We shouldn't live in that kind of world, but we do.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it, innit, really?
Yeah. And so Cooper's code, you know, white, yellow, orange, red, mate, everybody should know that, and everybody with you know, any regard for their own situational awareness has got to get with the program. It's got to enforce it and rehearse it all the time. Every time you leave the house, I'll walk down the road and over to the shops, and I'm looking around, and I'm actually talking to myself in my head. You know,
yes.
So
yeah, I do the same.
You know,
and also another good tip as well, if you're in an urban environment, you're down a shopping centre, always use stuff to your advantage, like windows and reflections, like corner of your eye, and you can see something behind you or coming up on your blind side. All of these little tricks of the trade, they just go towards your arsenal, so you can adjust your behaviour accordingly. And the worst thing you can ever do is just pretend it's not happening, shut your eyes and think it's going to stop, because it's not.
One of the greatest tricks that I have adopted over the years, if I have any unease about the environment I'm in, I always walk nearest the shops. So when I'm walking down the road, I walk nearest the shops or nearest the houses, because either I can step into a shop and I disappear, or there are constantly people walking past me. Yeah.
And you got one side as a barrier straight away.
Yeah, and no one's coming from that side.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. So little things like that, you know, that you just kind of build. I mean, it sounds like we're literally waiting to be kind of lifted and taken into kind of concentration camps, or I don't know, God knows what. But like I said, you know, I did a long time in the military. I was a frontline paramedic for 20 years, and I'm living proof that bad things happen to good people, because I was the guy that turned up. You know, so it's based on, you know, my lived experience, which seems to be a lovely little term at the moment. But you know, I just think in the 21st century, especially the people watching your kind of podcast, that, you know, it's real. It's real. You know, wake up and smell the coffee. There's all sorts of stuff coming down the tracks at us. Yeah. And I can't imagine the consequences of not having a position of preparedness.
Yeah, I think you're mad to be not prepared in the day and age. Right?
Only you know what your position should be. If you've got loads of money in the bank and your plan is get to the airport as quickly as possible and go and stay with relatives abroad, then that's a great plan, you know. And you know, but
risk.
yeah, exactly. But you know, if you're like me, I mean, we're not going anywhere really. No one's leaving. Most people are not leaving their home unless it's burnt to the ground or it's 5 feet underwater.
Yeah.
You know,
we've always agreed on this, mate, right from the start, haven't we? You know, you bug in, you bug out if you really, really have to.
Yeah,
but
no one's leaving their home. You know, we rode out the pandemic, we all went home, shut the door and stayed there. You know, and, you know, on reflection, you know, that was the right thing to do, or it wasn't. But anyway, we all came through it. You know, every house in the country is carrying more stores today than it was before the pandemic. And if you're not, I don't know what your plan is, but you better have a better one.
Yeah,
you know?
Because like you said before, like no one's coming. It's true.
No one's coming. You know,
Yeah.
if you look at the infrastructure of our little country, you know, I mean, I'm going back a few years, but we got burgled. You know, and the police
Yeah,
says,
maybe turned on the last one. Yeah.
police said, "Is it all right if we come tomorrow?" You know, it's all getting a bit late now. We're not going to do anything. Is it all right if we come back tomorrow? I mean,
Yeah, okay.
you know, and it's not malicious. It's because the infrastructure is overwhelmed.
Mm.
You know, if
Look,
you
hold that there, right, and go right back now, if you can, to when you was in Married Quarters and in Northern Ireland, how secure that place was, and the crime was practically zero, I would assume, on campus in barracks there, and compared straight to right now, where you go out your front door on a Saturday morning, different world, absolutely different world.
yeah, I mean, I lived in a I was very fortunate. You know, I went into the military at 17 and a half, and if you were talking to my mother, she would say, well, you know, you didn't come home until you were 30. You know,
Yeah.
but I lived in an environment where there was no petty crime. There was no graffiti. I didn't know anyone that had the car broken into. I didn't know anyone that had ever been burgled. I didn't know anyone funky. I didn't. It didn't happen. You know, and of course that was the case because I lived on a military base. Well, now military bases, Married Quarters, they're fenced and guarded, and you know, and kind of rightly so. So I guess it's similar, you know, but that also affects the individual. So when that person finishes their military service and they go and live in the community where all of these things are normal, you know, people get their cars broken into, someone stole the towing hitch off my truck one night. You know, I mean, I didn't think anything of it. It kind of bolts, you know, it locks on and locks off. But if you know anything about locking systems, really easily overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of turn around and take that one on the chin and sort of say, look, you know, you should have taken it off and put it in the cupboard in the boot where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. It's the best way to learn is the hard way, mate, isn't it? But it is what it is.
Brand new ones, 400 quid, funky. Of course, someone stole it.
You know, 400 quid, that's probably how much Sadiq probably Khan pays for like a lunch, maybe.
Well, I'm pretty sure Sadiq's not paying for it at all. I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. We probably are, inadvertently, aren't we? Yeah. But, which leads us back to full circle. I mean, when you look at all of these people, I mean, I've done a few videos and stuff and live streams about the 15-minute city and exposed all of the, you know, the money behind it all, of where it comes from, the investment, the funding. And it's like George Carlin. I mean, most of you guys remember George Carlin, and he famously said it's a big club and you're not in it.
You're not in it. It's
very true.
I had a security gig just inside the ULEZ zone, and it cost me £25 a day, funky, because I started work. I had to be on site for about 5 o'clock, so I paid going in, but I finished after midnight, so I had to pay coming out. Right. And I remember driving out of the ULEZ at 4:30 in the morning. I got an early relief. I drove out. I've done a 12-hour shift, so I'm probably a bit tired. I've got the best part of 2 hours driving, and I forgot to pay my ULEZ coming out of the zone. Right, I got an £80 fine.
Oh.
80 quid. And there's no negotiation. There's no. That's it. Thank you very much. £80.
Yeah, do you know what? That's the sort of feeling I had when I was in one of these ANPR controlled car parks in Shrewsbury, right? I mean, when I looked at the ticket, the receipt I got when I paid, like 9 quid or whatever it was for 3 hours, I looked at it and thought, oh my God, I'm 10 minutes over before we drove out of that place. And I thought, do you know what? When I was queuing up to pay for this ticket, I remember speaking to the guy in the queue, and he said, do you remember the days years ago when you had like that little yellow shed with a bloke in it? I said, yeah. And I said, you know what? If I was 5 or 10 minutes late, and this was before it actually happened, I said, you could just make up some spiel. Oh, the little boy needed to go to the toilet. I got a bit lost, you know. And he'll probably 99% say, yeah, that's fine, mate. But because you are dealing with a computer, black and white, yes or no, no empathy, whatever, but you're 1 minute late or 10 seconds over that time, that instant fine is issued and nothing's going to stop it. And but that is where we're losing the battle, because the AI and the computer systems, they're non-empathetic, and that's where the problems really do, because that fine could literally make the difference between whether that family gets enough food to last them through the week because of that 10-second late for that penalty fine in one of those places, you know.
I think what we've done is we've designed out the ability for people to use their initiative. So police officers, they pull someone over, and whatever the offence is, you know, maybe it's a minor offence, and in the old days, a police officer may well be able to, to use his initiative. You know, this is clearly not a person who's a career criminal. You know, this is a lapse of concentration or whatever it is. You know, blah 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 blah. But nowadays, you've got your ANPR cameras. I mean, I've got a personal friend, Funky, who's a frontline paramedic, and a little bit younger than myself. They put a speed camera in on his route home, and a covert camera, so no flash, you know, night vision. Anyway, he tripped this camera over the course of about 3 or 4 months 20 times. Right now,
Wow.
he went to court and he got a 6-month driving ban.
No way.
He spent over $2,000 on representation, so we had to get a barrister and a solicitor. But my point is, I was kind of working on a defence for Dave, and I sort of said, okay, so the implication is that you are a dangerous driver, that you're a speeder, yeah, and no one would have any problems with someone who was an habitual, you know,
it's indefensible, really, isn't
offender.
it?
Yeah, exactly. So I looked at the speeds, the excessive use of speed that he was doing. It was a B road, and he was travelling home about between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was between 5 and 7 miles consistently, between 5 and 7 miles an hour over the speed limit.
That's not that bad, is it? Really?
Right. So when you take into consideration the driving environment, the road traffic out there at that time, the fact there are no pedestrians about at 3 o'clock in the morning, or, you know, very rarely if ever. The other thing I did is I got them to examine his driving record for all the time he'd been a paramedic. And I said, well, how many speeding fines have you received driving ambulances? How many incidents have there been of reckless or dangerous driving undue care and attention? And the answer to that was none.
Surely that's got some weight in the case. Really.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but none of that was of interest. Because
no way. It had no lever at all.
No. When we went to court, they said, you're guilty of these offences, and therefore this is the punishment. Thank you very much. Next time we were in court about 20 minutes. That was it. There was no defence. There was no mitigating circumstances. There was no, losing your livelihood. Luckily for him, the company that he was working for got someone else to pick him up. Another member of the station would pick him up, take him to work, and he would attend. So for his 6-month driving ban, he didn't drive.
That's terrible.
But a lot of people, I mean, they'd lose their livelihood.
Yeah.
So if you lose your livelihood, if you can't work, you can't pay your rent. If you can't pay your rent, you're getting evicted. Do you know what I mean?
It's just a big control network, and it's a revenue generating agent, pretty much, from where we're looking at all of this, isn't it?
And that's the thing that I have an unease with, you know, that the world is changing, and I do feel that I'm being kind of left behind. That I absolutely hate compliance. I remember my youngest daughter is a little mischievous on occasions, right? And she was quite disruptive in a lesson at school, and the teacher sat her outside. So go and sit out in the hall. And so she went and she sat out there. But she's also pretty savvy. So I spoke to her, and I know the teacher came to me and said, I think we'd like to sort of get your daughter to do an assessment for ADHD, you know. And I thought, wow, you know, that's pretty serious. And I spoke to Gracie about it, and mate, she's a sharp, great kid, you know. And I said, well, Gracie, what happened? She said, well, you know, everyone in the class was banging the desk and shouting, and no one's listening to the teacher, and it's really disruptive, and you know, and I quite enjoyed the subject, and I just wanted to get on, you know. So I stood up and started shouting at everybody, and the teacher threw me out. Right, and I sort of said, and I sort of said to the teacher, I said, look, you know, this is this is Gracie's side of the story. And I said, but here's an idea, and it's just an idea. And the teacher went, oh yeah. I said, instead of getting Gracie an assessment for ADHD, why don't we just get a teacher that could control the class?
Well said, sir.
Right? And it was like, I mean,
I don't feel seeing that guy's face right then. You know?
That level of common sense, Funky, doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
Unfortunately, you're right.
If you didn't have the disruption in the class, the incident with my little girl getting out of her pram and showing off, which she shouldn't have done, and getting sent out in the corridor. But when
it's frustrating though, because someone has to do something, and you think, if I don't do it, no one will, and it's going to get worse. So you take the rap, don't you?
She's a smart kid. So what she said was, do you know what, Dad? When I got out in the corridor and I sat there in the peace and quiet, she said, that was lovely. That's just what I wanted.
Works.
So I think our little society is full of what's called authorized persons. So authorized persons are your parking attendant, your teacher, your nurse, your social worker, right? These are all people that have a level of authority. If a teacher raises a red flag over a child, let's say a child comes to school and it's dirty or it's always hungry or whatever it is, there's some vibe of this child's not being looked after, and if they're right,
the power to escalate, haven't they?
Yeah, if they're right, then obviously it's a just and reasonable intervention. But if they're wrong,
the ramifications are unreal.
Where's that end? And it's the same with parking attendants. So a parking attendant gives you a parking ticket, and and you're not illegally parked. You are within the box or whatever it is. And he said, well, I'll give you a ticket anyway, and just pay it, don't pay it, I don't care, send it in. You end up having to take time off work. You're going to court. You might have to pay for representation because these are authorized persons.
Yeah,
I know. Our society is full of them, and it's almost like the regular citizen. I mean, it reminds. Do you know what? It reminds me of kind of, the rise of the Nazis, where people were encouraged to grass on their neighbour, on their relative, on their friend. These people are putting stuff in their rubbish bin that they shouldn't go in that bin. That sort of stuff. Next thing you know, you got £180 fine on the doorstep. For and that's the sort of society that we're living in, and I have trouble with that. Do
you remember? It's weird because you try and sort of trace back to when all of this craziness more or less started, because we've been around the block a few years, and you do see change. I mean, one of the best things anyone could do is to just go to an old people's home and spend the afternoon talking to people in their 80s, and they'll tell you how it's changed, and you'll have a much better idea of what it used to be like and where it's possibly going. But it's the age-old thing. It's the when you look back into the blame culture. I mean, I'm sorry to blame the US, but they were renowned for, if there's any issues, sue them. And then since that sort of thing crept over here, it's literally people are just too scared to do anything in case they get sued. And then you've got health and safety and all of the BS with the money and all of that stuff that goes with that. Like, you could walk down a high street in the 70s and there was a hole in the floor. If you fell down it, it's your own fault because you weren't looking where you're going. Now there's every sign and God knows what telling you, caution, hole in front, because they don't want someone to sue them. And since then, it's gradually got so bad now, where people just love doing as they're told. That's how it seems.
The thing about, I mean, we are a compliant society, And if you put up a piece of white mine tape across the road, 90% of people won't cross it. Even if there's no one there, If you put a bit of tape up that says police, again, it's highly unlikely anyone will even walk across it. So we are. I've had this conversation with you before, but we are a disempowered society. So our parents and our grandparents have come through the end of the Second World War, were a self-reliant people. They had allotments. They grew their own food. No one was coming. There was no welfare state as such. Yeah, people were self-reliant. If the electricity went out, they had a plan. You get some candles out from under the sink.
Blankets and crack on.
Yeah, if you didn't have any water, they knew how to boil water and purify their water. They knew how to grow their own food. They were a self-reliant people. We are a disempowered society. We phone someone. If something happens to you, you phone someone. The water's gone off, come and fix it. I haven't got any electricity, come and fix it. Whatever it is not your responsibility. We are a disempowered society, and that is not accidental. That is not accidental. So I compare it to tax. The reality of tax is, if the government truly wanted you to be able to do your own tax return, tax would be a lot simpler.
Straightforward. Yeah.
Tax is not complicated by accident. Well, we are a disempowered society. We live in a time where everything is an offence, right? If I was to walk up my high street and stand still long enough, someone would phone the police, and when the police come, they tell me to move. And if I didn't move, it's highly likely that I would be arrested, taken into custody, and processed. I'd probably be released without charge, but I would be arrested and processed, because everything
about how it's complicated. No, absolutely right. I mean, the show that I'm doing tomorrow, live stream, is looking like it's going to be quite a big show, because we've got pretty much an expert who has successfully got around the council tax system, and he hasn't paid council tax, and lots of other people, and I know some of you guys watching right now, do not pay it legally. Okay, so no courts, no prisons, etc. There are definitely ways around it. And like you said about, you remember the old saying, tax doesn't have to be taxing. Well, just look at this. Legalese. Language used by lawyers and in legal documents that is difficult for ordinary people to understand. They don't want to make it easy. They want to make... See, this is the thing. And people say to me, why don't you vote? I say, listen, I only vote for people I trust. And quite frankly, none of them I trust. So why would I vote for someone that I didn't trust? Because if people voted for people they trusted and they knew that they would help as many people as possible, great. But we both know that that's BS, and it isn't like that. And if it was a great society, you wouldn't have to pay car parking charges. You wouldn't have to pay council tax, vehicle tax, tax on your fuel, tax on alcohol, tax on cigarettes, whatever it is. People in this country are being taxed to the hilt, and everything is getting more and more expensive. And quite frankly, when people are in these urban environments, like you rightly so stated, it's more tension, more stress. And when people have less disposable income, then they find themselves in a situation where they are so easy to flip. The slightest little thing, someone puts something on social media you disagree with, you lose it, you get red mist and you bang on the comments or whatever it is, or you go outside and someone spits on your foot and thinks it's funny. When people are in a situation like that, they change. Like you've seen it before in combat stuff. People change. And all of that is literally just coming down the road very slowly. And it's only when people have nothing else to lose and they're in a corner, you see how bad it gets. And when you look at the amount of police that are leaving, I mean, already a friend of mine who's just about to hand his warrant card in, I think today, on the last day of this month, as a serving police officer. And he told me that I think the police in Wales alone are losing 38 officers every single month. And you look at the recruitment drive and the numbers that are coming in through intakes, fairly minimal. So you've got less police, you've got more crime, you've got more tension, more stress, everything's getting more expensive. And then you've got these idiots like Sadiq Khan saying, oh yes, everyone should just get on their bike and ride around and whatever. It's going to come to a point where this year I do see big protests, big civil unrest, big riots, etc., especially in the summer months where statistically most people vent off their steam.
I just think that direct action is becoming more and more and more.
It's getting closer.
I mean, you don't have to look too far. I found myself walking around, and I can feel it in me. I am, I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm, whatever it is. But there have been occasions where do you know what? The silliest of things, someone cuts you up in the traffic and you just go pop.
Roadway style, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, and it's not that I need that 10 feet of road more than the other guy does. It's contempt. It's treating each other with contempt. With you know, I am the most important thing. I've said before, Funky. You know, this is the age of the self. 21st century is get rich quick, die trying. You know,
yeah, true.
And no one else exists. No one, only me. All I'm interested in is what's good for me. Boom. You know, and anyone gets in the way of that, and get rid of them. Cut them loose. You know, the day of kind of reaching out for others, it's like, you know. So I was watching my TV, you know, tonight, and every hour there'd be this little 30-second commercial about 30 seconds make a difference, turn some appliances off, you know, turn the heating down a click, you know, save some money.
For life and energy light bulb. Yeah,
right. And all that, right? And then boom, and they're all good ideas. But 2 miles from my house, there's a migrant hotel with 185 people in it. Right? And I guarantee I went for a job there. I was offered a job there, and I couldn't bring myself to take it. Yeah. But, you know, the central heating's on there. The windows are open, right? Free square meals a day. But you're turning around to regular working class people and saying, cut back, so that we can give free stuff away to other people.
Yeah.
You know, £7 million a day is going on the migrant crisis. Another 160 million has gone in the £40 prepayment cards that they give these guys to walk around with. Yeah. And another 40 million has gone on legal aid.
Yeah. Right? I've seen some of them begging on the streets in Shrewsbury down there to get extra PIN money. Some of them have been busted up in Newcastle for having cannabis farms, etc., and dealing drugs to schoolgirls and things.
You know, so, and this is, you know, so this is the wedge that's going in to regular working class people. What you're saying to me is, if I need legal aid, if I need legal advice, if I find myself in need of, you know, good counsel, well, I don't earn enough to get good legal advice, but I earn too much to get legal aid. Right?
Catch-22.
And that's where most regular working people find themselves. So when it comes to litigation, it's a non-starter. When it comes to, you know, wrongful dismissal, you know, just access to the legal kind of fair play system, you haven't got it. You know, when you turn around to me and say, pay your tax bill, get it in on time, and if you don't, there's a fine, so that we can take that tax and we can give it away to people. We can give away hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah,
we just give it away.
Like it was nothing.
Yeah. You know, so, I mean, we're sticking the boot into Sadiq Khan, but Sadiq Khan, £160 million was spent on the Garden Bridge for London, and not a single brick was ever laid. 160 million quid. How many people were bankrupted? How many people were pursued through the courts for unpaid taxes? You know, businesses that folded, you know, liabilities that existed. Those people were. There were genuinely people that were pursued for unpaid taxes and legal liabilities. For what? To give Sadiq Khan 160 million quid that he can spend and have absolutely nothing to show for it. Absolutely nothing.
I know, mate. I know. It's a travesty. It really is. I mean, we're going off topic a bit there, and that's fine.
Yeah,
because
sorry.
It's cool because we said what we needed to say. And to be frank, you can't talk about that for an hour and a half anyway. So this is cool that we're just being us, like we're in a pub like we used to do, right? But the weird thing is, I touched on this in one of the migrant things recently, was step back and look at it, right? Look at all of these. It's a massive attack on the tourist industry of this country. When you consider all of these hotels all over the UK with all of these migrants in there, and you look at how many tourist hotspots, okay?
Yeah, how many regular working class people? How many regular working class families are not going to get holiday because there's nowhere to go?
Well, exactly. But it's not so much that. The thing that I highlighted in a recent live stream about this was, look at what happened in 2020. You know, like you said earlier, everyone was told to just shut the door. That included businesses, right? Now, some businesses, fair play, they carried on trading. Some of the gyms, I remember it. It was great that they took a stand. Well, lots of them said, okay, we'll do as you're told. We'll lock the doors. They weren't reimbursed. Lots of them businesses never reopened again. They were gone. But the businesses that survived, they're really struggling. Now, when you add on to that the energy crisis and stuff, they're really pushed under the screw right now. So when summertime comes, it's probably going to be the last roll of the dice for lots of businesses in B&Bs, restaurants, cafes, pubs, bars, hotels, etc. When you look at all of these businesses, look at all of the people who would have gone to that town or whatever to have a nice holiday, stayed in a hotel. Guess what? There's nowhere to stay. There's no accommodation. So these people don't go to them towns. They don't go and spend money in restaurants, bars, clubs, etc. Okay? Because let me tell you this, the migrants, they're not going into the bars and restaurants, funding them and keeping their businesses afloat. So you're going to see lots of closures in pubs, bars, restaurants, cafes, all over the UK because they just can't do it no more because they haven't got that tourist influx, which we've always had, mainly because there's just no accommodation for these guys to spend their holiday. And you're going to see a massive uplift in camping because there's no more hotels left. I can see that as well.
Yeah,
Crazy,
I saw something the other day on non-fault evictions. 26,000 people in the United Kingdom being evicted for non-fault evictions, but because the landlord wants to divide the property up into rooms and let it for our migrant visitors, and £150 a day is what they're paying. You're talking about £1,000 a week for a room.
Nuts.
I mean, the house that I live in, at push, you could probably knock this into a 5-bedroom house. I mean, that's £5,000 a week.
That's how it could go, I think, actually, when you think about it.
a month. I mean, who could, if you're just in it for the money, I mean.
And another thing as well, I got an email from someone. Yeah, I know it all adds up, and it's a lot of money. It's extortionate money, actually, because that is going to be multitudes going up through the levels. But I was sent an email the other day, and I spoke to my partner about this, and it's something I've not considered before, because the way this is going with this migrant situation, at some point they're going to be contacted, and they probably are already, like foster carers and things like this. So you've got lots of these males, and it's been exposed by quite a few, even mainstream now, that some of these people, they're saying they're 19, when in fact they're like 16 years old. Okay. And they're saying that they're 16 and then all the rest of it, and they're getting into foster homes with God knows how much problems and social things. So they go into a foster carer's home, and there's already like a teenage girl in there, and there's a 6-year-old boy, and these two are looking after them. Can you imagine the issues which are going to be happening in those little households?
It's a genuine deceit all round. But I would turn around and say that for me, if I had to put it in single syllables, the migrant crisis for me is a Trojan horse. This is a Trojan horse that changes a nation.
Yeah.
The numbers that we're talking about, 250,000 a year, legal and illegal migration into this country, and these are people that are different, that are not white working class like me, that don't have my values. We can both go to towns in this country, and you could stand in the high street and you could not see anybody like you.
Yeah, I know. Right. I remember seeing that in London years ago, and I couldn't hear any English-speaking people there. Do
you know what? That is not far right. I am not far right.
No, me neither.
I am just right.
Yeah, I love that saying. I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm not far right.
I want what everybody else wants. I want to live with people like me. I want to live with people that put their rubbish out and don't just throw it out in the street. I want to live with people that value their environment, that pay their bills, that I want religious tolerance. I want courtesy. I want a job, decent housing. I want healthcare when I need it. I want the same as everybody else. But
that's the problem. We've elected these so-called officials, and they're just literally running away with it. Obviously, I mean, there's only probably very, very few MPs in Parliament. Moreover, the backbenchers who literally just joined up, believe they can make a difference, and they weren't swayed, and they just reside as backbenchers. All of the rest of them will just take the carrot and they'll do as they're told, and they change. And look what's happened to everything else.
I think people go into politics for the right reason. They care passionately. They think they can make a difference. But I think when they're in it, is I think the best example I can pull out of fresh air is probably John Prescott, who was Labour Party Deputy Prime Minister. But John Prescott was a shop steward for P&O Ferries.
Mm.
Yeah, that's where he came from, and he ended up as Deputy Prime Minister. But after a career in in central government, in professional politics, he left a multi-millionaire. He wasn't he didn't have the same values as a shop steward on the ferries.
Oh yeah.
He was earning multi-million-pound book deal. Blah 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 blah.
Sold his soul like everyone else. Brother.
Yeah, and that's the truth of it. I can't. It's like Tony Blair. I remember voting for him.
Well, big of you to admit that live, man.
No, because he was a breath of fresh air after 11 years for the Tory government or whatever. So the poll tax, the national ambulance dispute, blah 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 blah. I voted, and it was a breath of fresh air. But today, our political system is in crisis. Not a single person voted for Sunak. Not a single person voted for Gordon Brown.
Mm.
Right? So
That's true.
It's not one party politics. This is how it is. This is how it is, And I just feel that regular working class people haven't gotten out. Where is your representation? Who do you go to have?
Well, you know what?
Heard?
When you look at all of the situations which are happening in local councils and boroughs all over the UK, I think protests, they raise awareness, and you might get a few more people join the ideal way of thinking, like most of us do. That only goes so far. And then you're looking at the other end, which is extreme violence and rioting. How about just literally find out where these local MPs live and protest outside their house and harass them somewhat, but not being violent, obviously.
But
Alex, they're not going to be very impressed, and they're going to try and do what they can to make this stop.
It's a lovely idea to hold people accountable, but Alex Belfield got 5 years for stalking.
Yes.
In the
press, in the Daily Mail.
It's a high-profile case. Regardless of what you think about Tommy Robinson, but he's the only man that ever got a custodial sentence for contempt of court. The only man that ever received a custodial sentence for contempt of court. Yes, if you're in contempt of court, you're taken into custody, you're processed, you're probably fined. Yeah. You might get community service, right?
But you won't do time for it.
Yeah. And Nigel Farage, you can talk about Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage ran for a constituency in Kent. The Tory candidate went up against him. There's a limited budget as to what you can spend on a local election. The Central Tory Party put in over 300k for their candidate, right? And they subsequently won that election. And there was an investigation, and the Tory Party central office were found guilty of electoral fraud. They were found guilty, but nothing happened with
it still carried on.
The Conservative candidate was in power, and he, as far as it was concerned, the Tory Party paid, I think, a £300,000 fine, and that was it, and nothing happened. So where was the representation for those people?
There we go. I'm going to stand as Prime Minister for the United Kingdom because I've had it up to here with what is going on. I couldn't believe it when I just saw that, mate. It's just hilarious. I'm not being funny, but you're not the first person to say that. Oh, God.
Okay.
They're going to dig into my past.
Mate, I don't know what job I'd want.
That seems a lot of stress, doesn't it?
I certainly wouldn't want Home Secretary.
Can you imagine that? Oh, wow. MI5 or MI6, to be fair. I mean, they're both like in and out of the UK. Stop that. Insane. Anyway, mate, we think we're going to wrap it up. It's been great catching up with you again, Mike, and really good to get your input about all of the issues which face ambulance drivers and the other emergency services, all these crazy barriers that it's sticking up. It's been really cool, dude. Nice one.
God bless, mate. Bye.
Yeah, you take care, buddy, and we'll see. Catch up with you later on. All the best, bud.
Take it easy.
Bye, mate. So yeah, that was Mike. I'm a cockroach, and yes, he has got a YouTube channel. If you guys don't know the guy, and yeah, I love him to bits because he says it how it is, and that's how it should be. Okay, so awesome. Thank you very much for everyone coming along. I'm sorry if anyone's donated. I haven't managed to see much of the chat, etc. So yeah, on the replay as well, it really helps. And the moderators, like I say, if it wasn't for you guys, this stuff is just not happening. All right. So yeah, share the video. It really helps. And like I said, please send me an email if anything which has been discussed tonight is going to help the situation. That's really, really cool. So that is pretty much it from me. Don't forget, tomorrow night's live stream is going to be mega. And I'm not bigging it up, it's true, because I've had so many people contact me about, I really want to stop paying council tax. How do I do it? I'm scared, I'm worried. Well, we've got a guy who's pretty much an expert, and he's proven to have done it successfully. He's going to be on here live with me tomorrow night, and we're going to get some FAQs done, which most of you guys would want to know what, how, why, when, etc. And we're going to put it to him, and we're going to get all the answers that we need. All right. So don't forget tomorrow's live stream. Please share it tomorrow, because lots of people have had it up to here with this council tax. Because if you looked into it, like I showed on previous live streams, lots of funding comes from council tax to literally pit everything against us, and that is how it's looking. So one stand we could make is to cut off a big lump of funding by literally refusing to pay your council tax, but legally. Very important. Right, that's it for me. I'm out of here, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, and stay funky.